Mike Macdonald continues to add plenty of experience to his defensive coaching staff. We'll break out the latest addition to Seattle staff on the defensive side of the football coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, on this Tuesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening from Cheney, Washington, or you're in the land of the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, Nevada. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Senior Bowl wrapped up on Saturday. We're going to be diving into some of the key standouts in the trenches, the big fellas, the buffet bashers, offensive line, defensive line, some of the top prospects coming out of Mobile as we start to look towards the 2024 NFL Draft, plus some more coaching news for the Seahawks as well. This episode brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. While Seattle fans anxiously await the news on who is going to be taking over as the new offensive coordinator under Mike Macdonald in Seattle, the Seahawks continue to add seasoned veterans to their coaching staff on the defensive side of the football. We know that Carl Scott is going to be back. This team has already added Leslie Frazier as the assistant head coach. Now we get to bring in a coach with 20 years of NFL experience, the vast majority of those as a linebacker coach to take on that same role. Kirk Olivadotti, who has coached most of his career in Washington. In fact, 11 straight seasons with 7 different head coaches. That, I think, tells you all you need to know about this guy, that he was able to stay in Washington with all the turnover that they had in the early 2000s. Every coach that came in wanted to make sure Olivadotti was on his staff. Now he's on Mike Macdonald's staff, and he's coming over from Green Bay. He is leaving the Packers to join Macdonald, who he coached with at Georgia from 2011 to 2013. Those two are now going to be hooking up again with him taking over as the linebackers coach. And I absolutely love this move because this is one of the most experienced linebacker coaches out there. And the track record speaks for itself. When we get into some of the players he's coached here in the next few minutes, Rob, this is a guy who swings a pretty big stick for being just a linebacker coach.
No, he really does. As you just said, Corbin, I mean, it's the fact that Kirk Olivadotti has the experience that he has the prestige that he has really among the NFL. And for him to give up a good position already with the Green Bay Packers to reunite with Mike Macdonald, who he coached with at the University of Georgia years ago, he's as proven as it gets. I mean, there's a lot of coaches out there in the NFL that have a great track record because of their experience, specifically as a linebacker themselves or as a linebacker coach. We talked about guys like Ron Rivera. Of course, the Seahawks are very familiar with Ken Norton Jr. or, even Lofa Tatupu for, if we want to just kind of throw out some names here that Seahawks fans are familiar with. They may not be as familiar with Kirk Olivadotti, but his track record speaks for itself. The fact that he was with the then Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders, for as many different head coaches as he was. When I first met you, sir, you were working as a producer when I was doing a podcast with Scott McCloughan, who was, of course, at one time the general manager of Washington, and Kirk Olivadotti worked under him at that point. And the success Olivadotti has had at Washington, in Green Bay, at the University of Georgia just speaks for itself. I mean, whether it be young players that he has developed, let's say Quay Walker, for example, was a surprising first-round selection by the Green Bay Packers a couple of years ago and really has made consistent strides to become a very good football player for Green Bay. Whether it be a veteran Like, there are so many different veterans that you could mention that he has had his experience with. But I would just kind of go all the way back to say like a London Fletcher with the Washington, again, at that point was the Redskins all those years ago, whether it be young players or whether it be old players. Corbin, Kirk Olivadotti has done a great job of really breaking things down, explaining things, and making sure that his players were assignment sound, were highly physical, and were good people on and off of the field. And that's exactly what Mike Macdonald has been trying to create here. So it's very similar to what we talked about with the youngest coach on Seattle staff, at least to this point, Jay Harbaugh, who the Seahawks hired just yesterday to be their special teams coordinator. And we talked about how that was kind of an unusual move here for Jay Harbaugh to move away from his father, Jim Harbaugh, who took over as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, to see Kirk Olivadotti go from a good position with the Green Bay Packers and, of course, have 20 plus years of experience in the NFL to come sign with the youngest head coach in all of the NFL in Mike Macdonald now for the Seahawks. Again, just speaks to the pull that Mike Macdonald is bringing back to Seattle.
It shows you the respect that these older coaches have for a guy that really viewed them as the masters, and he was the apprentice all these years that he's coached with them. And now it's kind of flipped here. You are now the head coach, and we're going to come help you be as successful as possible. And you mentioned some of the names out there. I'm going to throw a few names out there. Olivadotti, before he became a linebackers coach in Washington, he actually started his NFL career working with the secondary. And guess who one of the players was that he coached in this player's first 4 seasons? It was Champ Bailey, a future Hall of Famer. So he was integral in that early development of Champ Bailey before Washington traded him to Denver in that historic trade that involved Clinton Portis. He was the coach involved there. Brian Arakpo, who was a very good edge rusher. Olivadotti worked with him as well as a edge rusher. He's done inside and outside linebackers. At Georgia, developed several high draft picks, including Alec Ogletree, who Seahawk fans will know from his time with the Rams. He was a high draft pick that came out of Georgia that was developed by Olivadotti. And then in recent years, you threw out the name Quay Walker. What about Devondre Campbell? He left Atlanta after 4 years. He was a starter, but the Falcons weren't rushing to re-sign him because he was just an average at best starter. He became a first-team All-Pro in the 2020 season with Olivadotti coaching him. So this is a guy with an extensive track record at this position. He's coached other positions. He's been a defensive quality control coach. All of those different experiences that he's had, and then the fact that he has coached with Macdonald previously at Georgia, that is going to make him another guy that Macdonald can lean on. Notice he's getting a lot of these experienced guys with defensive minds because that's going to be the easiest for him to be able to relate to as he adjusts to this first-time head coaching job. Now, the big question is who are going to be the linebackers that Olivadotti is going to be coaching? Because right now, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, and Devin Bush are all slated to be unrestricted free agents. The only linebackers currently signed in the roster are John Radigan, Nick Ballore, who at this point is really just a special teams guy. And then you've got Patrick O'Connell, who was an undrafted rookie that dressed for a couple of games last year. Those are the linebackers that are on the roster for the Seattle Seahawks right now. So that's something Seattle's going to have to figure out. Who is Olivadotti going to be coaching? But you do have to wonder if this hiring, Rob, is going to have a bearing on which players come back. And it isn't just going to be Mike Macdonald's decision or John Schneider's decision on which linebackers are going to be on this football team.
No, it's not. And that's the biggest reason why I mentioned the linebackers that I mentioned. If you want to bring back a veteran like a Bobby Wagner, again, Olivadotti has shown the ability to kind of reconnect with veterans, as I mentioned with, say, a London Fletcher. I love that you mentioned Devondre Campbell. And Devondre Campbell was a solid player for the Atlanta Falcons, but he was far from the all-pro that he became under in Green Bay under Olivadotti. So I think that could be a very intriguing to a guy like, I don't know, say a free agent like a Jordan Brooks, a free agent like a Patrick Queen of the Baltimore Ravens, who already has just been effusive in his praise of Mike Macdonald. So he already might be, considering, Seattle as a possible free agent, location to explore. And then again, I mentioned Quay Walker, who was a rookie from Georgia that the Green Bay Packers took 2 years ago. And Quay Walker still is is not the superstar that Campbell or that London Fletcher certainly became in their respective careers. But still, you saw the growth from him under Olivadotti. I think if the Seahawks are going to allocate some of their 2024 NFL draft picks to the linebacker position, as I think is very likely, then again, I think that you have brought in a positional coach here who has the experience, that has the, just the charisma that I think that you need to be able to lead those young men to be able to have some success, and have the confidence that you have the positional coach, that you aren't just kind of swinging for the fences and hoping. You have a guy that can teach the fundamentals to help that young linebacker be able to hit the ground running in Seattle.
It gives Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks a little bit of a fork in the road, but in a good way. You can go a veteran route. You can bring in rookies. This guy has proven that he can coach both experienced vets and youngsters at a very high level. Different stages of career, doesn't matter. He knows how to get back to the fundamentals and do what he needs to do to get these guys ready to play. So it does give them flexibility now, regardless of what direction they go at that position, which currently doesn't have very many guys on the roster and nobody with starting experience. Up next, Rob, we're going to be breaking down the Senior Bowl, what happened last week in Mobile. We're going to talk trenches today, offensive line, defensive line. We're going to get to offensive line first here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, and they make it fast and free. When I was running a site at SI, LinkedIn Jobs was my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates, and they made the process seamless. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It has a vast network of 1 million professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time and resources to hire. But thankfully with LinkedIn, the process is made intuitive. It's quick. It's easy. It helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought your way by FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, laughing at all the funny commercials, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown. Maybe you're thinking that Kelsey is going to have a touchdown during the game in what feels like his 15th Super Bowl he's played in. How many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Senior Bowl happened last week in Mobile, and it was a rare year that Rob Rang was not actually in Mobile for the festivities, but at least I can speak for you and I. The two of us, we have gone back and watched some of the footage that was made available from Mobile. We got to watch the game. I rewatched it today. I've watched film on a lot of these offensive and defensive linemen, and I'm starting to get into draft fever a little bit. And when you look at this Seahawks team with a new head coach in Mike Macdonald, physicality is the first word that was muttered from his mouth in terms of what he's looking for from his football team in general. They're going to be looking for that on offense. And all three of these starters at the beginning of last season in the interior, your Evan Brown, Damian Lewis, Phil Haynes combo, all three of those players are set to be unrestricted free agents in March. So the Seahawks have some significant questions to answer in the interior of their offensive line. And the good news, at least from a Senior Bowl perspective, this looks to be a very strong class when you're looking at guard and center prospects.
Oh, it is. Corbin, it's the best offensive line class I've seen in an awful long time. I've been covering the NFL draft now for, damn near a quarter century, which you can see the gray hair there. And as you said, it is a rare year that I am not in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl, which just stinks. I mean, I love Mobile, Alabama. Football is king there, and it is an awful lot of fun to be there. And so I absolutely missed it. But I can say that you didn't have to go to Mobile to recognize that the elite talent in this year's draft class is along the offensive line. Look, the quarterback class is good. The receiver class is good. The offensive line class is as good as I've ever seen. And so if the Seahawks want to get bigger and badder at the line of scrimmage, then this is the draft to absolutely do that. And a lot of that talent was available there at the Senior Bowl. Now, Corbin, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my absolute favorite prospect, bar none, in this draft class, mostly because he graduated from the same school in which I am a proud teacher, proud graduate of, Mount Tahoma High School in Tacoma, Washington. Taliesin Fuaga, big 6'6", 315-pound right tackle for the Oregon State Beavers. Some are going to want to push him inside to the guard position because his arms aren't quite as long, 33 3/8-inch arms. He's a little bit choppy with his footwork, but I see enough awareness and pass protection, and absolutely see the quickness to the second level, the ability to change directions at the second level as a run blocker, and definitely the power to be able to be a plug and play kind of an option at right guard or even at the right tackle position. So he is definitely one player that, he was awarded. This is one of the things I love about the Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy, who's one of our frequent guests, has done a terrific job since he has taken over as the Senior Bowl executive director. And one of the things that he does is something that we do with the Morris Trophy, which is an award for the best offensive and defensive lineman in the Pac-12. I am proud to be on the board of directors there. One of the things I'm proud of the Morris Trophy and proud of the Senior Bowl that they have done is basically they just said, look, we have our own perspective as former scouts, coaches, whatever the case might be, media. The players know who can ball. They know better than anybody. And so one of the awards that the Senior Bowl gives is they basically ask the defensive linemen, the linebackers, the guys who are rushing against these offensive linemen to vote who was the best offensive lineman. They asked the offensive lineman vote who was the best defensive lineman that were participating in the Senior Bowl. And Taliesin Fuaga, Mount Tahoma's own, was voted the best offensive lineman. And that's, again, one of the easy reasons why I see him as a possible plug-and-play fit for the Seahawks. I think if they aren't going to go with the local product, I think there's plenty of other players out there. You don't even have to go that far up I-5 to the University of Oregon and Jackson Powers Johnson, who is more of a center, possibly could play guard, also has some short arm syndrome for those that want to nitpick. But at 6'3", 335 pounds, Corbin, this guy is lightning off of the snap. His quickness, his power. I think if the Seahawks start this draft, because you have to take these players in the first round, there is no way that they are going to be available in the third round. The Seahawks, of course, don't have a second round pick. Then the Seahawks immediately get more physical, more aggressive in the running game. And I think that is one of the keys to success for Mike Macdonald's staff, regardless who's calling the plays on offense. That's one of the immediate ways for the Seahawks to be more successful in 2024.
You're talking about two guys that have first-round talent, but they get the job done a little bit differently. Fuaga, I call him one of those soul snatchers. He is a guy that he gets down and dirty, he shoots out of his stance, and he bullies guys. And if you're looking for physicality, that guy is probably the most physical guard in this entire draft class. Now, Jackson Powers Johnson, he has his own mean streak. He plays with plenty of physicality at center position. But I like him as a guard prospect, too. Watching the one-on-one clips, you see the ability to handle bull rushes with a thick anchor. You see the ability to move his feet and mirror. You see the hand technician that's there, and he's a savvy communicator. So that would argue for center. I think this guy's plug and play as a guard or a center. He's that kind of a talent. That's why you're looking at the first round. And watching him this year in Pac-12 games, that was the guy that always jumped out immediately with his ability to stonewall defenders. He gets to the second level and makes a lot of blocks in the run game. there's a lot of things to like about those two. Now, I want to go to a team that people don't follow very closely because everybody knows about Oregon, obviously, and Oregon State in the Pacific Northwest. Let's go to the other side of the country with another guard that I think needs to be talked about. And he played for one of the worst teams in the league. Jim Mora Jr., former Seahawks coach, is having some issues getting UConn into the win column. The Huskies had a really rough year. But you want to talk about a guy that's got some individual credentials here. Christian Haynes, 2 years in a row, third-team All-American, despite the fact that UConn as a team stunk. And then you see what this guy does in Senior Bowl competition, the way he moves. This guy moves almost like he's got basketball feet, like George Fant type player. He might be the most athletic offensive lineman in this entire class. And that's saying something because there's a couple tackles that we could mention too that might have a word to say about that. But you watch the way this guy's zone blocks. His athleticism shows up in his power game too, being able to get out of his stance quick, fire his hands into guys and knock them backwards. He mirrors really well. This is a kid that I think has a chance to potentially play his way into end of the first round. Probably we're looking early second, but this is a guy that's definitely got a high ceiling and that athletic ability. The fact he was an All-American 2 years in a row, you know that the pedigree is there. So that just tells you how good of a guard class we've got in 2024.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Christian Haynes as well. What I am always going to come back to is the level of competition and the fact that Haynes had as successful of a week of practice at the Senior Bowl as he did is definitely reassuring. If you want to talk about the best athletes as far as this offensive line class, I think that we have to shift the conversation to an Oklahoma tackle. Now, he has left and right tackle versatility. That's interesting, I think, for the Seahawks because, as we discussed many times before, Abe Lucas, of course, is a little bit of a medical question mark moving forward. Look, the Seahawks have a good one in left tackle Charles Cross, but is he an elite one? Because in a couple of years, he's going to want to be paid like he's an elite one. And so Tyler Guyton, 6'7", 328 pounds. Corbin, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he winds up clocking a 40-yard dash under 5 seconds. I wouldn't be surprised if Taliesin Fuaga does the exact same darn thing here. We are talking about, again, an exceptional class of offensive linemen. Tyler Guyton, to me, is the most athletic tackle in this class. He is a little bit more inconsistent, but in terms of his size, I mean, again, 6'7", legitimate 6'7", 34.5-inch arms. So he kind of passes that threshold as well. Just really, really balanced. You just
former H-back too. That's why he moves the way he does.
Exactly. So there's an awful lot of things about him that are super exciting. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Graham Barton. This is a player from Duke who basically has played the left tackle position, but because he also has shorter arms, I suspect that he is going to be moved inside guard or center. But if you want that kind of Tom Cable, I know that's a scary word for a lot of Seahawks fans out there, but Tom Cable's a heck of a coach. If you want a guy who is the ultimate in versatility, then I think the Graham Barton from Duke, 6'5", 314 pounds, another guy who I think is going to run very well and surely show off his athleticism. He is another one. The point is that the Seahawks, I fully expect them to use one of their two first selections, either in the first round or the third round, maybe even a trade down to acquire more selections, because I think that this is an offensive line class that you have to take advantage of.
Yeah, Barton is a player that I'm very intrigued by because I think he might be the best run-blocking offensive lineman in this class. You could make an argument. Watching the film, this guy is nasty, and he finishes. I'm wondering in the NFL if he's not going to get penalties because this guy might go beyond the whistle a few times here and there, but he is a nasty finisher. He plays with ferocity at the line of scrimmage. He drives guys backwards. I just have some concerns with him in pass protection, especially as a tackle. Got beat inside a lot in the couple games that I watched. So I have some reservations about his versatility from that standpoint, but I could see this guy in a phone booth being a really good guard at the next level. And there's some talk about first round for him as well. Again, you're looking at the talent and depth in this class. Just with the Senior Bowl, this is a very good offensive line class. When we come back, we're going to switch gears over to the defensive side of the football in the trenches. And there's plenty of talent that was in Mobile on the defensive line as well. We'll be breaking it all down up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by DoorDash. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? That is a game day travesty, especially when you're watching the big game, the Super Bowl. Order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites right now. You can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order by downloading the DoorDash app and entering the code LOCKED23. When I'm kicking back with my wife and family watching the big game this upcoming Sunday, we're going to make sure we have some Jet City Pizza, our favorite gluten-free pizza place in Seattle, maybe a couple 2 liters of root beer, some cinnamon sticks for the rest of the party. DoorDash makes the process easy, so I don't have to leave the comfort of my couch for delicious, great-tasting food before, after. It's so simple. I've ordered Jet City off the DoorDash app so much. The managers, they know me by name. They might even know my middle name at this point. If you're ready to satisfy your taste buds on game day, quench those cravings with your favorite local restaurants via DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order using the DoorDash app and entering the code LOCK23. Subject to change and terms apply. This episode's also brought your way by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy during the big game also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. If you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered, my friend. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and eBay's guaranteed fit ensures that your part is going to fit your ride every time or your money back. You're going to be burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there tuning into this episode. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The draft is still several months away, but it's never too early to start digging into prospects, especially once the Senior Bowl comes around. As the Senior Bowl's motto is, the draft season starts when the Senior Bowl arrives. So we just talked offensive line, some real nice prospects in this year's class, maybe the most impressive O-line class that we have seen in a long time. Defensive line is not quite as talented, not quite as deep as the offensive line class this year. At the same time, though, there were plenty of impressive players in Mobile. And I think we got to start with somebody coming from a program that surprised last year, Missouri, kind of coming out of nowhere as one of the top teams in the SEC. And Darius Robinson, you want to talk about a guy 6'5", almost 290 pounds, but he moves like he's 265, 270. Bull rushes like a madman, incredibly physical player. And the thing that I love about this kid, when I watched Missouri this year, to play in the SEC, you got to be rugged in the trenches, particularly against the run. This guy is an absolute beast against the run. He knows how to stack and shed. He knows how to finish plays. He gets into the backfield, extremely disruptive. For a team like the Seahawks that has not been able to stop the run the last few years, a guy like this that could have positional versatility to play up and down the line, maybe a potential first-round candidate for some teams coming up in April.
Oh, no question about it. He's going to be a first-round pick. I don't know that he was viewed widely as a first-round selection before the week of practice at the Senior Bowl, but he has had a terrific senior season, had flashed incredible ability throughout his career at Missouri. But one of the things that scouts had always just been so intrigued by with this young man is his size-speed combination. As you referenced, he measured in at Mobile at 6'5", 286 pounds. Corbin's got really long arms, 34 3/4-inch arms, and he uses them really, really well to reset the edge. He has explosive power. He is quick. He can play up and down the line of scrimmage. I think that any conversation about the risers from the Senior Bowl this year, if it doesn't start with Darius Robinson, then it is a list that you can basically just scratch up and throw away because he was that dominant. Now, that said, I don't believe that this is a defensive line class that is nearly as good as the offensive line. Now, I actually put the Seahawks in the only first round mock draft that I've created so far. You can look it up at Fox Sports. I actually have the Seahawks going with the defensive tackle from Illinois, who's an underclassman, Jerzon Newton, who did not play in this game. And part of the reason why is because the Seahawks allowed the second most rushing touchdowns in all of the NFL a year ago. So obviously, this is a position of concern. That's with Leonard Williams. If the Seahawks do bring back Leonard Williams, who of course they traded their second round selection to acquire him, and you and I have both kind of been effusive in our praise about what Big Cat was able to do for the Seahawks, then I don't think that defensive tackle is quite as big of an area of concern. But still, let's focus in on that position here just for the sake of this conversation. Again, Darius Robinson to me is the player that we have to focus in on, a player that I'm super high on, that I think that the rest of the country is going to start catching up to, is another player from the University of Oregon. I mentioned before the center, Jackson Powers Johnson. I'm going to mention the defensive lineman for the Oregon Ducks, who was terrific this season. He wore number 3 for the Ducks, Brandon Dorless. Now, he came in at 6'2", 272 pounds, which sounds a little bit light. I don't think it's light in today's NFL. I think that is a guy they also can play up and down the line of scrimmage. And one of the things that's really intriguing about him, Corbin, 33 3/4 inch arms. It's a little bit shorter than how I mentioned before with Darius Robinson, but it was Dorless who led all defensive linemen in college football a year ago with passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. So while he may not have the arm length, he has the vision, he has the awareness that you're looking for. Really underrated player. I don't know if he's going to make the first round, but he's not going to make it all the way down in the third round where the Seahawks currently are slated. And Dorless is going to be a starter in the NFL sooner rather than later. So to me, those are the two defensive linemen that are kind of have some positional flexibility I'm most intrigued by. I'm also really intrigued by McKinley Jackson, kind of a more traditional nose guard, but I'll let you, kind of talk what you think about McKinley Jackson, just because I know that you and I both are really high on the big man from Texas A&M.
I don't know how many times we got questions this year about the lack of girth or the lack of size in the trenches for the Seahawks. Where's the beef? Well, the beef is McKinley Jackson. This guy is a monster, and this gets thrown around with big guys, but I really do think that he has arms the size of tree trunks. Like, this man is massive. And the other thing that I love about him, the stats don't necessarily show how disruptive he was at Texas A&M. Not a guy that had a ton of sacks, but you turn on the film and you can see just how difficult he is to move and how athletic he is, being a 6'1". He's not tall, but he's 6'1", 320 plus pounds. I've seen weight around 330s. That's probably his playing weight. But this guy is short, stocky, and really explosive for a player of his size. And he can't, not only does he blow you up as a bull rusher, there were plenty of examples on tape against SEC competition of him splitting gaps and showing penetrating ability that you just don't see from 325, 330-pound nose tackles. That is a position in today's NFL that doesn't get drafted high most of the time. This guy, though, if he goes to the combine and does what I think he's going to do, I think he's going to put off the charts numbers up there. Maybe not Jordan Davis, but he's got that kind of a profile in terms of athleticism. When you watch him on game tape, if he can put up numbers like that, you might see some teams say, wait a second, that is a rare nose tackle that I want to draft early. Maybe not a first rounder, but he to me is squarely a second, because there's a lot of pass rushing upside and he is a near immovable object in the run game.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's a huge area of concern for the Seahawks. Now, again, if they are able to bring back some of the players that they already have on the roster, then perhaps a traditional nose guard is not the position that you need to focus in on. I think that those of you watching on YouTube are going to be able to see here a picture of Marshawn Nealand from Western Michigan. And Western Michigan, of course, is the same program that has not necessarily been as kind to the Seahawks. D. Eskridge has not been the player player that the Seahawks are hoping for. Marshawn Kneeland, on the other hand, is a guy that I think that his consistency is what sets him apart. He is a guy that has played both in left and right defensive end roles. He has been a stand-up guy, but I really like him best as a traditional defensive end. He has long arms. He's got strong hands. And he is able to set the edge. If you're going to go with the guy that sets the edge the best, in my opinion, then you got to go back to the team that continually produces these type of players, and that be Alabama. Justin Eboigbe is another one who doesn't have the production that you're looking for, but he's got the size, he's got the length, he's got the physicality, and he's got the consistency that the Seahawks, I think, are going to prioritize. Again, he is one of those middle round prospects that I think that the Seahawks might be taking a very close eye on. Again, Justin Eboigbe from Alabama as well.
I think Marshawn Kneeland is a name to keep a very close eye on with the Seahawks because he is not the athlete Jadeveon Clowney was. Obviously, he's not going to be a number 1 overall pick, but he has the length. He's a very strong run defender. He plays with a relentless motor. And there's underrated pass rushing ability there in terms of his counters and things of that nature. So even though he's coming from the MAC and he played at Western Michigan, that is a guy, not only is he one of my favorite names in this draft class, I just love it, Marshawn Kneeland, but that guy is a football player. And his length in Mike Macdonald's system, I could see really working out well for the Seahawks. So that is a name from the Senior Bowl that fans should be keeping a very close eye on throughout this draft process heading towards the end of April. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, Rob and I are going to move away from the trenches. We're going to talk quarterbacks and some skill positions, the sexy positions, as some fans call them. We'll be breaking that down in our Senior Bowl recap. That'll be coming up on tomorrow's show. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for listening. Go Hawks.